This week, we're going to be looking at Julian of Norwich, who is actually one of my favorite writers. And I really enjoyed going back and rereading some of her stuff for this study this week. Julian is a woman, or was a woman, who lived in England during the time of the Black Plague, the bubonic plague. And in this time, she was what was called an anchoress. An anchoress is a female who kind of moves away and out of society in an effort to live a simplistic life on their own. And anchorite would be the male version of that. So Julian, was an anchoress who lived in a kind of countryside of England where she lived in, it's called a cell. It's essentially a one-bedroom house with a cat. And that's why a cat is usually depicted with her. She had a small garden in her front yard, and that's how she got most of her food. She would have people come by, priests, doctors, check on them in an effort to also bring her other food and make sure she was okay in general. And her life was basically a life full of study and reading and prayer. Julian was what is known as a mystic, which is someone who kind of lives a simplistic life in an effort to understand the mysteries of God more fully. They devote their life to things like prayer and service to others, and usually live either in small clusters or kind of on their own. That's a very broad definition of mysticism, and I'm sure you can find a much better definition. But for the purposes of today, Julian was an anchoress, a mystic who lived by herself during the bubonic plague. New kind of thought is that maybe she was living by herself in an effort to not catch the bubonic plague, to social distance, if you will. But that's kind of a new thought. Mostly it's just that she wanted to be able to commune with God in a way that would be uninterrupted. When she was 30, she came down with a horrible fever, and she was convinced that she was on her deathbed. And during this fever, she had visions of God and visions of Christ come to her to actually have conversations with her and to teach her things. She ended up writing down these visions after she got better in a book that is called Revelations of Divine Love. You are going to read two excerpts of that today. You'll read a little bit of her first vision and a little bit of her fifth vision. And it's written in kind of Middle Old English, so I've tried to kind of clean it up and make it a little bit more readable for 2021. But this book is important. First, it is probably one of the oldest examples of written mystic work in Christianity. It is one of the oldest surviving ones. We know that there were others. But it's also important because this is the oldest surviving book written by a woman in the English language. In all intents and purposes, this is the first book written in English by a woman. Now, of course, there were probably others older than it, but this is the only one, this is the oldest one we have that survives. Julian continues to be an example in the Christian community of someone who holds on to hope in the midst of pain, in the midst of sickness. You will see that come up a few times in her writing today. And she's also a great example of what it means to fully devote yourself to prayer, to the life of living your life for God and living your life for others. You'll notice in the statue that I put up in just a minute ago that she is holding that book. And you'll notice that she is also usually depicted with a cat. That's her good friend. I hope that you enjoy reading her this week as we look at Julian of Norwich.